Per, how about impact assessment? Could you maybe later on talk a bit about that? How, let's say, 5 years, 10 years down the into the future, do you have thought of building in impact assessment of this? But I saw a couple of hands up here. Rajul, Lisa, I think. Rajul will have to ask a question because of her engagement in the East African Master's Program. Lisa, you're first.
I'm first? Okay. Thank you very much, Per, for a very interesting lecture here. I think that this would be wonderful for our students at the SLU as well to have access to. But what I was wondering, you didn't say anything about which level do you think the students should be on when you give them this kind of tool to work with. And can you see that this type of you say, education, would that be more suitable for students in some disciplines than in other disciplines? Or do you think that this is a way that would fit more or less all the different areas? Thank you.
Would you like to take that right away?
Sure. Thank you very much, Lisa. The level that it's aimed at is what in the US we call the seniors, that is the fourth year of a bachelor, the last year of a bachelor's degree, and master's and possibly PhD students. I've used it in both the last year bachelor's degree and in graduate student courses. The experience is that it fits best among the undergraduates because at least the PhD students in economics want a lot more quantitative content. If you give a course to PhD students in economics at Cornell that doesn't have at least 5 equations on each page, they don't think it's worth anything. So this conceptual kind of thing that we're talking about here, interacting with policymakers, stakeholder analysis, and so on, is of much greater interest, in my experience, to undergraduates than to graduate students in economics. Now, if you talk about graduate students in other disciplines, it's a different story because they would like to have the conceptual aspects to it. The disciplines, it works wonders if you got several disciplines in the course because they have different perspectives. And here's what I have learned. The students learn at least as much from each other as they do from the instructor, right? Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think it's true. When they have to present, each case is assigned to a team of 3 students, the way we run it at Cornell. It could be 4 or 2 or 5, I mean, but a small group of students. They then meet and talk about what policy recommendations should be made. And I have attended some of those small groups, and let me tell you, they get into it. They really get into it, and they learn from each other. And a nutrition student will say, no, we can't do it that way for these reasons. The economics student said, that's ridiculous because that's not economical, that's not cost effective. So, and then maybe you have an agriculture student who come in and say something else. So the multidisciplinary aspect is important. It's not essential. You can run this course. I've run this course for just economics students and just nutrition students. But getting different disciplines is important. Can I also answer the impact assessment? No, we don't have anything built in on impact assessment. I would be very, very interested in any ideas anybody might have as to how we can build that in from the outset.
I don't think we have thought about that, and the impact assessment of teaching programs. Maybe it's not so well established, but Suraj, maybe you could come back on that one later on, and there must be thoughts about the large investment programs which the US government has done in the 1970s or so, many of which I think have a very long-term payoff, very positive payoff. Please.
Thanks. Emmy Simmons, various groups. I wanted to ask one question and just make one comment. Comment first, which is that as you were talking, it struck me that this is the quintessential Georgetown School of Foreign Service kind of course. And given Joachim's remark at the outset that there's a lot more interest in agriculture, that in fact, it sounds as though many of the cases are a bit agriculture and food oriented, that this might in fact be an appropriate one to make sure that somebody like Carol Lancaster or Andrew Natsios knows about and might in fact be interested in testing it out with you.
Okay.
And the question had to do, though, a little bit more back to your Cornell experience. Do you find that this approach resonates with business students who obviously their own mindset is as entrepreneurs, money entrepreneurs, right? And this provides sort of the opposite perspective of producing public goods as opposed to private goods. And I just wondered if you'd had any sort of feedback from that business as a way of building out sort of business interest at this point.
Yeah, the program is is part of the Cornell Entrepreneurship program, which was originally developed as a business entrepreneurship program. It's actually housed in applied economics and management, but it's closely affiliated with the business school. They have developed very recently a social entrepreneurship component of that program. I have had some students from the business school itself, and they have been, I think, equally enthusiastic as the other students. We get excellent evaluations of this approach from the students, and the business students don't seem to have any different opinion than the rest of them. Whether we could introduce this in a business school course, I'm not sure. That's something I can check into. But yeah, it's all associated with the food system, which includes health and trade. But I will check with Carol Lancaster. That's a good idea.
Per, you may remember me interject an anecdote before we call on Schengen. I think it was 4 years ago that you ran a workshop on ethics. You mentioned ethics several times today, and I found it interesting that an issue which we discussed in those days at your workshop, considering a Hippocratic oath for economics and agricultural science students, not only to do no harm, but also to try to do good, but essentially do no harm, has now been adopted by dozens of business schools, including Harvard. And so in those days, I think it's only 4 years ago, business schools would have thought we are stupid or have very weird ideas. But something has changed in the world economy, and that has triggered with impacts into the business school community. I think that aspect, the ethics and the stakeholder dialogue, are completely new to normal classroom approaches. Schengen.
My questions are not as challenging as Joachim would have wished. Just some comments. One is the language. Have you thought about translating this set of materials to other languages, French, or Spanish, or even Chinese? The second question is, have you thought of developing a set of slides, or animated slides, that you can put in the internet so everybody can easily download them? You don't need to do much. Then if I look at the case studies, I read your 2 volumes. I only have 2 volumes. I don't know why. One volume is missing. This case is very carefully. It seems to me it's very difficult for a touch-not researcher to really understand what the authors have really done. So my suggestion is whether you could actually ask the authors to also provide the data and the software, the program they have used. For example, Stella language program or SAS program. So then, if the researchers can replicate the results, or your students can replicate the results, so that would be very useful for some of the top-notch students.
Thank you very much, Schengen.
I'm a student at IFPRI.
Pardon?
You have a student at IFPRI, Shengeng, read the 2 volumes, he said. You heard that? That should make your day.
He did. He also wrote part of it.
Yeah.
It is. We have an agreement to translate this to Chinese. This will take place over the next few months. So either all the cases or selected cases. It has not been agreed yet. Here's one of the interesting issues we run into. We put all these cases on the web for open access. Open access means just that. Cornell University took patent to protect the open access so nobody else could take exclusive rights to it. Then I went to Cornell University Press and I said, how would you like to publish this? But you can't get exclusive rights to it because it's an open access. And they said, well, we thought about this, but we don't have a solution to this. And so I said, I have a solution. You get copyright to your book, but the content of that book is virtually identical to what's on the web. But you don't have any say over what's on the web. They agreed to that. So that's what we got right now. Now, there's a Chinese publishing house that wants to publish either all of the cases, all 3 volumes, or some of the cases. But they want exclusive rights. Now, what do you do? Well, so I said to my Chinese contact, I said, look, as long as you take it from the web, you're okay. But don't ever touch anything that's in a Cornell University press book. I said, fine. Then they said, well, we want exclusive rights to it. And I said, well, that's a problem because you can't really kind of take exclusive rights to something that Cornell University is protecting. So what we ended up with is that the Chinese publishing house will enter into an agreement with Cornell University Press so they can, in fact, publish what the Cornell University Press is publishing. But you see, this is an interesting situation where you've got open access on the one hand and some exclusive rights. That's much more than you asked for. On the slides, the 7 lectures are based on PowerPoint slides. And they, if they have not been put on this website that I showed you that's on the card out there, they will be over the next week or 2. We're in the process of putting, so there will be lots of there will be 7 sets of PowerPoint slides that people can download and use, misuse, whatever they want. We thought about having data sets to back up this material, and we might still, if you think it's a good idea, we might go back and see if we can do that and just put that on the web right along with the cases, so people can do more research on it. A good point. Thank you.
Rajul?
Thank you very much, Per Rajul Pandya-Loach with IFPRI. One, picking up on Joachim's point about the African Masters Program, and then a question for you. Per, listening to you, I actually felt depressed that you were depressed about the African situation because it's not the experience I have with the Masters Program. We at IFPRI helped facilitate collaborative Masters Program in Agricultural and Applied Economics in East, Southern, Central Africa, 12 countries, 16 universities. Mm-hmm. And that program has gone into a second phase now with a major new donor on board that will allow us to double the intake in the 50 students a year. And it's a major challenge because there are a lot more students who want to join the program than can be accommodated. And what is exciting about that program is that there's a shared facility one of the semesters in Pretoria where all the students come together from the various universities. There's tremendous interest and excitement among the students. You're very right, Per, that one of the key challenges is the demands on the faculty, or the competition for resources, and the lack of resources, but we find that there's also tremendous enthusiasm among the students. Mm-hmm. So how to convert from the demand from the students to motivate the faculty in turn is one of the key interesting questions. And I wondered whether you saw any possibility of creatively marketing your program as a money-making venture. And I say that in all seriousness, among, not our program, but competitors to our programs are the agribusiness programs. And there, the demand on these agribusiness programs in Africa is very high because it is also seen as a potential for employment generation down the road. And I was curious, you mentioned wanting to test out the government officials, but how to bring the private sector, the budding private sector on board, how to bring in the civil society group, who is going to be employing these students down the road is a potential partner. And I say that because when we started up our program, we brought not the universities together, we brought the demand side, the employers, the potential employers. What do they want from the master's program? What will make them hire a potential graduate? And I would love to see to turn around and try and bring these potential employers of these students who have benefited from this innovative training to want them to invest in this. And I wonder if that might be something to consider. Now, to turn around, the question I have for you is, how do you choose the cases? You know, what are the cases that what's the process by which you arrive at these cases? And how do you choose who writes them up so that they are balanced or interesting? And how do your students get engaged in evaluating the cases? Do they have a chance to vote on them, what's interesting to them or not? Do they have a chance to vote for future cases? So I'm curious about that. Thank you.
Okay.
There you got an agenda.
I got an agenda. The people who I found were not motivated were the instructors, not the students. We didn't interact with the students in those workshops. They were all instructors. We asked them to behave like students so they could go through the process, which it was a certain amount of trepidation I went into that, but that worked very well. So I'm sure the students are very highly motivated. I have no disagreement on that. I don't know if we can make money on this, but it seems to me that the issue has multiply effect. Yeah, we could run lots of short courses with all kinds of people where you and I could be the instructors, but somehow we need to multiply this. And what we are doing in Zimbabwe, for example, is an example of that, where the instructor who came to the workshop in Uganda is now going to run this course in Zimbabwe. That's the kind of way we can reach a lot of people. So if there's some way we can bring those other people in that you're mentioning, including those that are going to employ the students when they finish, let's do it, absolutely. And maybe we can have a non-profit covering the cost kind of thing. And if we need to make money, we'll make money. But that's not my concern. My concern is that we reach as many as possible. And it sounds like we have a potential collaborative project here at you. So let's follow up on that if the Director General is supporting us on this. Choice of cases. How do we choose the cases? It's partly opportunism. But it's important that the author has lived the case. That's critical. Some of the cases were written by graduate students who had lived the cases. In fact, for 2 semesters in a row, I had a group of two different groups of graduate students writing cases, and we met once a week and we discussed the cases, and they discussed among themselves, and we sent them out for review and so on. Many of the other cases were written by professionals in their own rights. IFPRI covered the cost of some case authors, and each of the other 2 universities did the same thing. So that was a collaborative kind of effort. So there was a bit of opportunism, but what we tried to do was to cover the whole spectrum. So we have cases in each of those. I showed you this set of bullet points. We have cases in each of those, and you can see them out in the book, or you can go on the website. Did the students have a voice in that? Only the first time when I used these draft cases at the University of Copenhagen, I had them fill out an evaluation form. And one of the questions in that evaluation form was, is this case a useful tool for training? Did you get anything out of it? But except for that, we haven't used students as evaluators. Now, we use peer reviewers, but that's a slightly different thing. But I think we should come back and talk about the possibility of expanding this. I have tried very hard to get kind of a foot in the door with the African Masters Program, which I am very, very supportive of, and it was started while I was still here, as you know. I have not been able to do so. I have some difficulties getting people to respond to my emails, but if there was some way we could get this material included in that course, it would be great. So maybe we can talk about that. Okay.
Per, would you comment on the role of development assistance, aid, and higher education? But you will, I share your happiness that a big new donor has come along to support that program. I don't dare to speculate what would have become of the program if that hadn't happened. If I compare that to the motivation issues which you related comparatively South Asia and China versus East Africa where you were, a correlation at least is there that Chinese higher education has no link to development aid. Bangladesh and very little, as far as I know. Whereas African universities are scrambling to survive on development aid because government doesn't finance. Is that correlation part of the causality? And would you extrapolate from there on this current debate on development aid, good and bad, and especially in higher education?
I'm not an expert on that subject, but based on the work that we did as part of the Inter-Academic Council work, we concluded, the team concluded that we're in a bit of a vicious circle here, that governments didn't put a lot of emphasis on supporting universities, governments in sub-Saharan Africa, and therefore universities were not doing a very good job. And therefore the international donors said, look, we're not going to pour money into this particular rat hole. We would much rather create a new research institution, which is something we can make sure is a good thing. They did that within agricultural research. The World Bank created several of these economic analysis units in various ministries and independently instead of supporting the universities. And that, of course, just made the universities even worse off. So I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Where we break that vicious cycle is an open question, because you can't really blame the governments for not wanting to support something that doesn't work, and you can't blame the universities for not doing a lot of good stuff when they don't have any resources. That leaves the international donors, so why don't we blame them? How about that, Amy?
But even the international donors quit funding universities by and large because the money wasn't being matched by the government.
There you go.
So, I mean, talk of vicious circle is
right.
definitely.
Right.
And the whole sort of linkage.
Mike.
The whole sort of linkage between research and extension and training and teaching
Right.
just has never really gelled in most countries. Not all, but most countries in
Right.
Africa.